Welcome to the Great Beer State podcast from the Michigan Brewers Guild. The Great Beer State is a weekly show sharing conversations and stories from the passionate people who contribute to our vibrant Michigan beer community. It is made up of a mix between full-length archived interviews from the Guild's first documentary book project, A Rising Tide, Stories from the Michigan Brewers Guild, and conversations recorded in the here and now. Each episode is kicked off with a conversational update from host Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Guild, and the beer-evangelist Fred Biltman, author of A Rising Tide. Here's Scott and Fred. Welcome to episode 11 of Michigan's Great Beer State podcast. I'm here with my good friend Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Michigan Brewers Guild. Scott, how are you doing?
Doing great, Fred. We're in August already. Just wrapping up July as Michigan Beer Month.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. Summer is moving along. It's been a very surreal year, of course, but Michigan Beer Month happens, pandemic or not, and it was a good thing. I liked seeing, even though it was a different experience than seeing everybody in a park, in Riverside Park in Ypsilanti, I felt like a lot of contact was made. A lot of the old beer family and friends virtually hoisted glasses and said hello and shared their thoughts on Michigan beer.
Yeah, it was fun to have some sort of celebration. And if anybody wonders why we did that on Thursday evening, it was because it seemed kind of maybe not the best use of everyone's time to try and do it on a Saturday afternoon. And we've had really great summer weather this year. So I hope people were out having a good time. I know of a couple people personally who did go to the park. Victor was actually going to do a countdown to beer, and Brigham went over there later in the day too and had a beer.
Yeah, I saw some of that. I've been enjoying, some of the social media posts all month really of different beer members coming up, and certainly on festival weekend. There were a bunch of good ones, and seeing those guys in the park really cracked me up. Which is, better than the alternative. It's nice that it, I don't know, we can still find a smile here and there about it all. But yeah, you were mentioning the virtual toast that was a collaboration with MLive. You have any more thoughts or thanks to share about that production?
Well, I'll say we wanted to do something that kind of helped celebrate and put a punctuation or an exclamation point on Michigan Beer Month in lieu of the Summer Beer Festival. And I thought it was good to partner with MLive and get some of their energy and involved with it. I think we probably reached an audience that was a little different than we would have internally and a little bit bigger. So all in all, I thought it was fun and thought it went pretty well. I'm not exactly sure where we've shared the two versions of the Michigan Beer Fight song, but you did a really engaging, great version, as did Ted Badgerow at Ipsy Ale House.
Yeah, I loved his version, and thank you for the kind words. It was fun to put together, and I thought overall the production was pretty cool. I mean, it's a lot to juggle that many guests coming in and out of a, even a virtual setting, and some stuff pre-recorded or not. So I thought it was a nice production and enjoyable way to see different people from the community. And yes, Ted, whose interview is coming up in a couple of weeks here, boy, he did a great rendition of the fight song at the beginning in the streets of Ipsy. Well, I guess in their social, I don't know if it was their beer garden or their social zone, but in the streets of Ipsy, out in front of Ipsy Ale House.
Yeah, it's actually expanded outdoor service area for Ipsy Ale House is where they were, but it was in the street outside of their place. But yeah, if anybody's curious what the second verse sounds like, there you go.
It's for the truly advanced. So in general, we start with updates. We've got an interview with Chumley, as we all know him, Derek Chumley Anderson from Veerling, restaurant and Marquette Harbor Brewery up in Marquette coming up. But before getting to that, got updates for brewery allied enthusiast members and our Michigan beer loving public. What's going on?
Well, a couple things that have had me somewhat preoccupied this week. We have two new executive orders that impact our industry from the governor's office, and really they don't change a whole hell of a lot, except that regions 6 and 8, so the northern part of the state, are included in this further restriction of bars, some bars being able to open. What it says is if you're a bar type establishment and more than 70% of your total sales come from alcohol, you can't have indoor seating. You can still do outdoors, you can do takeout, but you can't have people in your place. And I think the intention there is to try and have busy night spots, not full of kids and young people, I should call them, congregating. And it's created a lot of confusion. Number one, it specifically calls out on-premise retail licensees, and it's a bit of a technical issue, but only our brew pub members have on-premise retail licenses, and they typically are not in that 70% or more total sales being alcohol. And this doesn't apply at all to somebody with a microbrewery or brewery license, because they have manufacturing license with a tasting room permit. So that part of the order doesn't apply to them. But there are other specifications in there that have caused quite a lot of confusion. And so we've been trying to sort through that, get a little bit of clarification, share it with our members. And I noticed I get the opportunity to have a weekly phone call with my counterparts from around the country and some folks from the Brewers Association. And there's a lot of this confusion out there in quite a few states. They're struggling with some of these delineations being made. Well, this type of on-premise business can open and this type can't, and it might have to do with the food they serve, how much food they serve, how much their alcohol sales are. Do you count distributed beer in that alcohol sales? Can you be open? Can you not? Is a brewery different than a restaurant or a bar? And there's really a lot of this going on in a lot of states. So if you are a consumer and you're confused, there's a lot of confusion within the industry itself. And I think it even goes deeper than that, because in some cases you have health officials and other folks who are part of the regulation that don't understand the nuances and the differences maybe between a brewery tasting room and a busy bar. Now, I feel like in Michigan, our government agencies, the legislature, the executive office, liquor control commission, I think they've got a pretty good handle on what breweries are and how the tasting rooms are family friendly and different in a lot of ways than bars. But certainly some of them look like a typical restaurant too. So anyway, I would like to clarify for anybody who wonders that the order that bars who sell more than 70% of their sales in alcohol can't have inside service, that does not apply to a brewery or microbrewery license type. So check with your favorite location. You may assume that they're closed inside because they don't have any food service or no substantial food service, but that's probably not the case. Now, of course, again, it's up to the individual operation. Some places have decided they just don't even want to be open inside. So enough on that. It can be confusing.
Yeah, and I think one thing that this might shed light on, whether it's helpful for now or other times, is I think the general beer drinking public doesn't always know or pay attention to the difference between a brew pub license and a microbrewer with a tasting room, because they look the same. They serve the same purposes, especially if they're both serving food. And it's a license nuance in this state that, is sort of behind the scenes. So I think one way to tell the difference is if a brew pub can sell alcohol that they didn't make. So they can sell traditional spirits by other organizations, and they can sell guest beers by other breweries. So if you see a brewery who has a restaurant and they're selling other liquors and beers, they are under the brew pub license. If
Uh,
you see one who only sells the beer they make and no spirits or no spirits that they don't make under a distiller's license, then most likely, 9.5 times out of 10, that's a microbrewer's license, and that's the distinction you're making. But I think what the second point you make is important, which is who knows right now, whether it's by regulation or whether it's by business or whether it's by hours, because, a lot of people are short staffed and changing their approach to when and how to be open. So I think it's a look them up. Calling may be difficult based on people, hours and being able to get to the phone and stuff. But I mean, be resourceful and check it out versus assuming they're closed or really assuming they're open.
Absolutely.
Seems to be the thing. After all that, it's like phone first. Check it out.
Check it out. Look at their social media page.
But the restrictions that were in the southern part of the state are now covering the northern part of the state. And it's other than that change, it's sort of indoor service is affected, especially for those that aren't qualifying as a restaurant one way or another.
Yep, which largely doesn't apply to our members.
Yeah.
But it may apply to your favorite bar, and there's a whole host of other considerations that we hate to see the industry impacted like that. Speaking of which, though, that leads me right into another thing that was in the news, and I had a couple reporters asking me about this week, and that is the aluminum shortage. And aluminum is one of the things that we've been watching. We've had, I would say, a pretty good supply chain of raw materials throughout the whole pandemic. If you look at malt or hops, a lot of other supplies. A couple things that have been on the radar right through. One has been CO2, and we seem to be okay with that. Interestingly enough, a lot of the CO2, well, really depending where you are regionally, CO2 that breweries use mostly comes from other industries, whether it be ethanol fermentation or other things. And there was a lot of concern with the lower production of ethanol being used in gas, that there were going to be CO2 shortages, and we weathered that pretty well. But this aluminum thing has really is rearing its ugly head, and it's at least aggravated by the shift in business. So with all these bars, restaurants, breweries not being able to do as much business on premise for so many months, what we've seen is a general shift in consumption. So the data I've seen doesn't really say that people are drinking more. I think they're drinking about the same, but they're not stopping at a bar or a restaurant or a brewery after work. They're getting that alcohol at the grocery store, party store, off premise location. And what that means is a lot of beer that might have gone into kegs or bottles or was on premise focused shifted to the off premise, and the package and demand there is cans, oftentimes multi-pack cans, so a 15-pack, 24-pack, 12-pack. And you couple that with the fact that there are a limited number of aluminum can manufacturers in the country, and they don't have a lot of excess capacity. We're seeing breweries being alerted that they're going to be rationed or not be able to order or receive all the cans that they have on order. And it's got different impacts for different breweries, because you can't just decide to put that beer in bottles instead of cans and think it's going to get treated the same way in the distribution channels at the grocery store and that consumers are going to buy it. Now, hopefully, more pub type breweries that maybe can't get their crowler can, their 32-ounce can, might be able to shift to a plastic bottle or a glass growler and still do their takeout business. But it's something that we're about to see kind of impact the marketplace, and it's a little discouraging. It's going to put a damper on volume for some folks.
Yeah, and I imagine a brewery that's can only and doesn't have packaging alternatives could get in a real pickle.
Yeah, I am hearing that it is somewhat format particular. So you take a brewery that's all cans and normally in 12 ounce, they may be able to do some shifting to 16 ounce and still be okay. But I think I think we're going to hear more about this in the coming weeks.
All right. Well, I'm sure you'll keep everybody updated, and also, in the various opportunities for discussion. If people need help or resources, they should reach out and find out who has the most current update on what to do about it, how to move through it. Anything else for beer loving public?
No, I think maybe we should take a look at our Brewers Dozen for this week and talk about, as we move through these podcasts, we want to do our best to at least give a shout out to all of our members. And I'm proud to say that we have more than 300 breweries in our membership represented. So we decided we'd peck off a Brewers Dozen or 13 a week and at least give them a mention.
So here we are. We're in our 11th week, so that means we've already featured 130 breweries, which is just another way to look at the stuff that says, "Wow, that's something." And one of the things I've enjoyed about this segment is breweries that I haven't been to or didn't know were open or whatever. It just this is what we hope it does, is prompts a little thought about somebody you should give it a little attention to and maybe a visit and try some beer. So you want to kick us off here with this week's Brewers Dozen?
Sure. Kind of a unique place is the American Harvest Brew Pub at Schoolcraft College. So this is a restaurant that features the culinary efforts of the whole school, and it is a brew pub. They have a brewing program and they have a brewery on site. So in addition to the creativity coming from the students on the culinary side, you can get their beers. And I have to admit, I have not been there, but I look forward to the day that I get to go check it out.
Yeah, and they've been active and forward in terms of beer and brewing education in the state. So that's great. Beer Camp in Ann Arbor, another culinary tie. They've done a lot of things, including sausages and other charcuterie, I believe. And without much delay, they're into beer.
Yeah, and they're all homemade, handmade there. I looked at their website earlier today just to kind of see what was going on, and it did say they were temporarily closed. So we're looking forward to them opening back up. The Boathouse Beer Company and Boozery in Tawa City is a brew pub in Tawa City. If you don't know where that is, it's a beautiful port town on the kind of northeast side of Lake Michigan, Lake Huron. Real cool little brew pub, touristy town, but they're open all year. Full complement of beverages as they are a brew pub, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah, and going back to Grand Rapids, we have Creston Brewery. Nice brewery. Also, another one that's active on the music scene. A lot of great Michigan artists going through there. So beer and music in Grand Rapids.
Keweenaw Brewing Company, and they have their downtown pub location in Houghton, of course, college town with Michigan Tech there. And they also have a pretty good sized production facility making beer for distribution in South Range, which is just, it's not far from Houghton, but it's a whole separate place. There's no, as far as I know, there's no retail or tasting room operation there, but they have a real active pub downtown in Houghton.
Next up is New Union Brewery in Lowell.
Yeah, small brewery, just not far from Grand Rapids. I consider it in that greater Grand Rapids area. That similarly, in Greenville, there's Flat River Brewing Company. That's kind of in the greater Grand Rapids sphere also. They are a new member last year. And I've been there. Can say that I enjoyed my visit. Look forward to getting back.
All right, going back to your neck of the woods somewhat in broad strokes is Hoplot Brewing Company in Sutton's Bay.
Yeah, I get lots of people mentioning how much they like Hoplot. So, and they have a pretty big outdoor seating area, even in the winter time they do. So I think that they're probably managing to make things work okay. North Grove Brewers in Montague. If you don't know where Montague is, it's kind of north of Muskegon. But North Grove Brewers opened in all this. They were set to open early this year or in the first quarter, something like that, and they got open and are a new member through the pandemic situation.
Boy, that has to be a ride.
Oh boy.
Heart goes out to them. Hang tough. Do your best. So next up, we've got Pike 51 Brewing in Hudsonville, Michigan.
Yeah, and moving over to Southeast Michigan, Tecumseh Brewing in, you guessed it, Tecumseh.
And following that, we've got a couple here from South Lyon, starting with Third Monk Brewing Company.
Yep, there's Third Monk there, and also Witch's Hat Brewing Company is in South Lyon, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say hi to Ryan and Aaron. Ryan Cottengim was on our board of directors for several years, and I miss seeing him at board meetings, and hope everything's going well there. So that wraps up the Brewers Dozen.
Right on. So that leads us to introducing our guest for this week, Chumley, who's been brewing at Vierling since 1995. Vierling, it was a restaurant prior to shifting to a brew pub license shortly after that license came into existence, which was in 1993. And boy, talking with Chumley is a treat. He's a colorful character, enthusiastic, and well, there's only one Chumley, I guess, is what I'll say. But I enjoyed the conversation, and also really, as we've said with some of these interviews, he shed light on the early days of the UP, what it felt like, but also kind of a play-by-play on who was opening, as he refers to the original six up there over the first few years.
Yeah, I count Chumley as a good friend and have known him for many years now. He's always had a real active interest in everything that's going on with beer in the Brewers Guild, and he's just got a really interesting background. He came out of the kitchen at the Veerling and has been their brewer since day one, and continues to be. He's the guy. I mean, I don't think he's ever really had anybody helping him. He still manages everything and has his hands on everything at the brewery, and he's one of these people that is entirely self-taught. And when he started teaching himself, there were limited resources, but I don't think Chumley has ever forgotten any detail that he ever read anywhere, or if he talked to anybody, anything that has to do with beer. I don't think he ever has ever forgotten any of that, and he'll tell you about it if you get him going.
Yeah, that's it. And we were talking earlier that we'd probably need a little bit of homework and a couple of beers to figure this out for sure, but he's certainly in the running for the longest standing continuous brewer in the state. Still holding the position of brewer, making all the beer or making beer daily. We could only think of one other person in the running, which is Rick Dowlinger from Bell's in Kalamazoo, who was there when I got there in 95. And if there's somebody else, shoot us a line, and I think we could get those two talking and figure out who's been doing it longer, or I don't know what. But I mean, to me, that's just talking about the company he keeps, and that's doing it on a 5-barrel system. He's been rocking the brew house for a long time.
He really has, and his beers are good. He's been a good brewer, continues to be a good brewer, and the Veerling is a quality operation in general, whether it's atmosphere, service, food, beer. I've never really drank anything other than their beer there that I can think of, but I'm sure they make good cocktails and things too. Not that that's what I want to promote, but yeah, I really like the Vierling, and I'm very fond of Chumley, and it's kind of his operation there. Even Terry Doyle, the owner, kind of calls it Chumley's place. So it's if you haven't met Chum and you're in the Vierling, look around, and it's
You'll
worth
hear him
introducing
coming.
yourself. Yeah.
Pay attention and you'll recognize the voice when you get up there. What I was going to say too, and kind of wrapping it up, getting ready to hand it off to him, is I think he is an excellent voice in why we did A Rising Tide as a project. And he talks about both the void of sort of collaborators, the void of community that he had as a brewer in his first years up there, and the few people that he was able to reach out to. And then he talked about how that's shifted. And, we were sitting having beers at Blackrocks talking about it. He consulted those guys as home brewers. I mean, he really is able to show these different experiences he had, or share these different experiences in different eras. And really, I feel like he made a case, or demonstrated the value of having a community of professionals working together, supporting one another. And he does it naturally with great enthusiasm, and just appreciated it. So with that, we can hand it off to Chum. Here's Derek Chumley Anderson of Vierling Restaurant and Marquette Harbor Brewery in Marquette, Michigan, just before the UP Fall Beer Fest 2018.
Cheers to Chumley.
Cheers. Well, hey, Chumley. Cheers.
Cheers
Thanks
to
for
that.
joining.
Some good Michigan craft beer.
Yeah. So maybe you can start. Just tell me who you are and how you came to be in the Michigan, how you started brewing.
Well, theoretically, I started as a chef first, kind of like John over at Terra Firma. Yeah. Okay, so I did that for probably 8 years. In the early 90s, we decided to add a brew pub. Well, we did is we had a lot of import or what little craft there was at our restaurant.
Now, were you opening chef?
I was their main dude.
Right, but I mean, did you from the day one?
Fairly shortly after we opened,
okay.
Back in '87 when we were just a restaurant.
Gotcha.
Before we added the brewery. But when we decided to put a brewery in, picked me to be the brewer. So I didn't know anything. I had to learn from doing a little home, but I mean, I really went in blind with it.
Yeah.
But I'm that type of person that when he focuses on something, I just went at it and learned everything I could. But, it really does take that hands-on doing it.
Yeah.
And I mean...
So what year was that?
1995.
Wow.
See, when I first started, there was probably only 8 or 10 other breweries since the law changed, since the brew pub law came about.
Yeah, which was 93.
Yeah, we were December 95. See, when I went to try to learn anything, there was only one other brewery in the UP, which was Hereford and Hops.
Yeah.
And that's the only other brewer I could go talk to at the time. So It was pretty kind of limited. I mean, even I believe the books or even the stuff out there wasn't geared towards any small-scale craft brewing. It was all home brewing or large other end, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Actually, there's a magazine back then that I learned most of my stuff from, called Brewing Techniques magazine.
Oh, yeah.
It was a great magazine because it was geared towards the small craft brewing industry at the time, which is probably in its infancy, but we just put it in, and that new equipment and the installer that came with it.
So did you figure out what equipment to get, or did that come as kind of a package deal?
We shopped around a little bit.
So you had learn how to brew and order some brewing equipment.
We practically knew what we were doing it a year before it actually all happened. But the owner Terry, he shopped around a little bit. We were gonna buy DME at first, which was their 3-barrel whatever system they were selling at the time. But somehow he hooked up with these Bohemian brewer importers that was out there in California, and they offered us a really good deal on this 5-barrel almost showpiece system that they didn't really brew, and use it, and we got it for a fairly good deal. I think we only paid 50 or 8,000 for all that stuff, brand new back then, which seems, that's actually not bad at all, but
yeah,
to get, 6 tanks and the whole entire system, everything. But
so what was the first year or so like? What were the first brews like?
I think back, this is a really good story because we brewed the first three batches. I think it was a honey wheat, an IPA, and what was supposed to be an amber ale. But I didn't know the guy that came with the equipment ordered the first pallet of grain. Well, we ended up throwing like this really dark caramel malt in that amber, and it ended up being red, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But that ain't the best story. After we fermented them and transferred the first batches to the bright tanks, we had 10 beers on tap. Well, we hook up that wheat, and we're like, my God, this beer is we are going to be rich. Here's the thing. It wasn't the right line. We were drinking the Frankenmuth something that we had. We went hooked up the real honey wheat, and we're like, oh, this ain't so.
Oh, you got some work to do.
You get what I mean? I'll never forget that. Wow, this is some really great beer.
We got this shit dialed in.
Yeah. Then we figured out we hooked the wrong line to that tank.
Yeah.
And we were actually drinking them Frankenmuth Pilsner.
That's pretty funny. So 95, were
It goes
you
like this. 95, I was on my own. In September, because I worked at 2 breweries at the same time for a few years too. I started brewing at Tequaman and Falls also. I was doing double duty.
Yeah.
But Jasper Ridge opened in 96, and that's when I met Grant. The only other brewer I kind of could talk to that's nearby me. And I got to know him. And then right after the guild was formed, I think early on Rex was doing these bus tours up north, I think, if you remember that.
Yeah.
Well, Scott was on, this is the first time I met Scott, right?
Yeah. Who was Big Buck at the time?
I was brewing at a batch at Tequaman and Falls, because that's as far as I think they came up for that I-75 tour they were called or something like that, I think. And that's when he came in and met me, and I started talking to him, and that's pretty much the next brewer I probably met after Grant, and of course John that was at Hereford and Hops. But other than that, I had very few contact. I didn't know so many people. I mean, I knew Rex and Mary from the very beginning, because they were really active back in the very beginnings, because I don't even think the guild was formed till December of 97, or what I mean,
right,
somewhere about that. So there really wasn't a guild for the first 2 years I was brewing. There was very little anything, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's why when the guild did come along, which I know you were part of in the beginning too, along with Larry and everybody else, right? I believe.
Yeah, that's true.
See, I didn't know you guys that well back then.
No, it was a long ways away.
I knew, you know what I mean? Because he happened to wander in the brewery there.
Yeah.
But I think he left Big Buck not too long after that, went to Miller for a while. Yeah.
So do you remember hearing about the guild? Oh, hold on one second. Could one of you ask about the music? Can you tell me, like, when you first heard about the guild, what were your thoughts?
It was through Rex. See, the guild kind of went through a transformation, as you know, from the very beginning, and then to now. See, when it first.
So when you first heard about it to becoming involved.
Really in the beginning, in them first 90s years, I knew more of it through Rex. And I do think we joined once in the but it would be the owner more than me, because I'm just down there doing all the brewing, and he's dealing with that stuff more. And I think we did join like in 98 or something. But then a couple of years went by, and he didn't renew it, and kind of lost interest in it. You know what I mean? Or it seemed like the UP was more left out of any of that affairs, other than Karen Breeze that in the beginning there with from Grand Marais there when she was more involved with Chris, but I think she got out of that. But I remember earlier on Karen Breeze being part of that. See, the guild it's almost like there was the guild in the beginning, and then there's this little lull, and then when Scotty came back is how I got more involved, because he called me and said, Chum, he was trying to drum up the membership, you know what I mean? And he started making phone calls to people he hadn't talked to in a while, and that's when we rejoined, and I've been involved with that ever since, you know what I mean? And that didn't happen until like, what, 04-ish, 5-ish, maybe, when Scotty...
Yeah, I think it's 05.
But there was kind of a lull there that I didn't really hear much about, you know what I mean? There wasn't a lot of involved. I think that was Terry's take when we first, that guild was new and forming, and it seemed like it was more just downstate, and there wasn't a lot of brew pubs in the UP, as you remember back then. What, 6? I call us the original 6, because there was the 6 of us for those first late.
Yeah. And what are the original 6?
Hereford, if I can go in order of opening, maybe Hereford and Hops first, then us, then I think it's Grand Marais or Jasper Ridge that same year, then Tequaman and Falls and Library and Houghton. That was the only 6 up until Keweenaw opened in 2004.
Yeah.
So for almost like 10 years span or 9, there was just those 6.
It's also pretty wild to look at the UP. I think, if you asked somebody not from here betting odds of, survival rate, you'd think the UP would have a harder time than everywhere else. But those original 6 are all cranking beer.
They're all still open.
That's something.
Most of them were all brew pubs also, though. Hey, they were all brew pubs. See, that was the UP across the bridge, and it was all brew pubs. No micros until KBC.
Yeah. So, can you tell me what, I guess as that community grew, how has that changed your environment as a brewer or as a business, having a community of brewers versus those early years of feeling?
Well, the early years
solo.
We were the only game on the block, so I mean, we had a more diverse crowd of people coming there, from college kids to everybody in between to your you know what I mean? Now that's kind of tapered down a little bit, because we got two, breweries in town that are maybe more catered to the biking community, to the college crowd, you know what I mean?
So that's meant sharing some business, from sharing the audience a little bit.
The thing, that's why I always say that the restaurant brew pub's a little different. My sales always go hand in hand with pretty much how busy we are as a restaurant overall. You know what I mean? That percent-wise, where a production brewery or this type is, that doesn't rely on food sales, or they're almost two different demons. I always talked about, many times I get questioned, how come we can't get your beer in the store? How come you're not canning this? How come you can't get your blueberry yet? You know what I mean? And I always have to explain the brew pubs can't sell out, and I know I've been screwing with Scotty, and I need to get that bill changed. We're excluded from everything. We can't be in competitions. We can't be in anything as a brew pub. He's like, Chum, that won't ever happen. He tried changing that. But I mean, as a community, I think it's all helped us grow. I mean, look at I think back to even 10 years ago when I did an interview with Diane that they were going to publish in a thing, and I was saying, this is when beers all of a sudden everybody was pushing the envelope, like Shorts and of all these crazy beers. If you can think it, we can brew it, of anything, and that was exciting. Now it seems like that's almost 10 years ago to me. I was saying that then, but it's just exploded. I remember when I started, everything was almost color-coded, red ale, brown ale, and people like, I don't want none of that. The first years we started in 95, 6 at the restaurant, I could hardly get people to drink an IPA. Oh, that's just too bitter, right? You know what I mean? Now it's like everything you could think of, they want more, Well, everything's barrel aged and wild, bringing back these old world styles that, everybody forgot about for so long, the craft industry. Not just in Michigan, but as a whole, but in this community especially, like Blackrocks and Ordox and Barrel and Beam, that are using locally sourced ingredients more and incorporating so many great things into beer now. It's pretty exciting. I wish I could do it more in the setting I'm at. It's a little harder to do,
So we were talking to David and Andy, and they talked about coming to you in the early years as home brewers and picking your brain. I imagine they're not the only ones.
Well, they were home brewers, and they'd get their ingredients through me because they'd buy, they're making so much homebrew, they're buying, they needed a 50-pound sack. So, I'd say, well, yeah, here's my catalog, pick out some, how many do you need? 32 bags. I'm like, well, that's almost my whole pallet. So, I guess we'll order 2 pallets. But actually, when they first started, they approached me and said, hey, Chum, what do you think about opening a brewery? I could have been part of this from the get-go. Yeah. I just said, well, I'll help you guys out as much as but I'm just going to stay doing my,
Yeah.
Because I was as worried as them of jumping into this. I didn't know if it was going to work, but I did say one thing in the beginning. I said, dude, this ain't going to be big enough, man. 1 barrel batches ain't going to cut it. So they did take some baby steps in the beginning where they probably were unnecessary, maybe financially at the time. But, I said, no, we need bigger than this. But it blew up so fast, I couldn't have believed it. Should I have took them up on their offer? Maybe.
Well, what was it like for you? I think hindsight is always something, but I think what was it like for you to see interest in kind of the next wave of people and see somebody going through a similar process to what you went through?
Yeah, I know.
What did that kind of bring up?
It was fun, actually, because I did hang around. In the beginning, I did help them a lot. I put in the tap system and all that stuff when they first opened and did those first few batches with them, But we were basically using to watch them grow. I just wow, I can't believe this. It was astonishing when they opened. It's just from the get-go. I was like, wow, you could have my 5-barrel system already. In this little house, it was hard to fathom, but it was exciting to watch it all happen. And I was happy for them, They really went for it and did what they wanted to do, and it just kept growing and growing and growing.
Have you changed your system at all over the years?
Just added more tanks over the years, but amazingly, my equipment is 23 years old almost, and I've had almost 0 problems with any of it. Maybe a couple pump seals here or there, but other than that, some of the pumps that have been running 24/7 for 23 years are still running there.
That's wild.
Isn't that crazy? My glycol chiller pump that runs 24/7. Same one from day one.
Yeah, that's pretty good stuff. I'm kind of fascinated by thinking about your life shifting from chef to brewer. And were you a beer fan?
I wasn't the biggest beer drinker at the time.
So your whole palate and your whole appreciation
was more of a chef than, I could bring up John from, Terra Firma. He was more always into that kind of spices and stuff, which, he grows a lot out there and uses a lot. But back in those early days, I think my meticulous was the right thing that's why they chose me to be the brewer, because of the way I work,
so
my ethic
principles of the chef.
But I had the passion for it from the get-go. You know what I mean? I still do this. You gotta have that as a brewer.
And I'm curious about those early years when you first started learning about it. What took off for you, and how did you change as a drinker? How did you change? Your whole flavor library was
Budweiser.
changing as a chef, right? So what did you pick up on, and what did you love most about the shift?
The shift is just, I'm going from doing something. I enjoyed making food in the different flavors, but when I got into brewing, it seemed more to me like something I could control myself, because it's not the same as a fast-paced restaurant, and I really enjoyed it. And the thing is, I like the maltiness of the brewing. You know what I mean? I really do love that smell. And I think in the beginning,
it's a little bit like baking or even
think in the
curing.
beginning I was tending to be the type that made the more malty, high mash temp beers, because I didn't know as well as what I was doing, other than what I read, until you start doing it time and time again and see the results. But I know now I probably brewed drier beers back then, but back then it's just, what's different is today everybody appreciates craft beer. Back then it wasn't as quite that. I mean, I'm learning to make just these basic styles, English ales, and most people weren't that educated in it like they are today. I mean, I'm blown away what happened to craft beer. I mean, we went from less than 1% of the market to almost 10% since then, I believe, if I'm not correct on the numbers. But the beginning, that hoppiness was another factor that I had, that most people were kind of against in that 95 era, at least around here. It was very hard to get people to, and then it slowly, I watched it change, gradually over the years, boom, people just wanted that. And then I think it's the new generation I think home brewing has a lot to do with that, how that came back. It's spurred a whole new young generation that are, just appreciate craft beer and push the envelope. A lot of the new breweries that are even owned by younger are just doing something great.
So the whole flavor awareness has changed, and I think the number of people, I think you're talking about both sides of the audience.
Yes.
And then the flavors they're familiar with, is that now, because it's not just what they like, but it's they're not shocked by hoppiness, even if whichever way they lean on it. Where I got to believe in 95, you're putting flavors in front of people they've never even seen or heard.
No, absolutely. And that hops was the biggest one for me. I seemed to all beers. I remember when I brewed at Tequamanon for those first few years, I would want to tweak her recipes because I thought they were all too light palated they were geared that way on purpose. And I used to say, I want to bump this one. No, you don't change. You know what I mean? And I'd be like, okay, I'll, you know what I mean? But,
so did you get around, at what point, or have you, how did you get around to taste other people's beers? And when did that start, if it did?
That was limited in the beginning. Like I said, there wasn't a lot around here. I mean, and I didn't travel a lot. I worked like a lot because I'm that kind of work ethic person that works a lot and hardly ever goes on vacation. I know I kind of wish I would have more in some of them years traveled around and checked out more breweries than I have, you know what I mean? Because it's just, I'm a one-man show. I don't work well with others.
Did that change at all, though? Did you start getting a broader awareness of what other people were making at some point?
Oh, definitely. And it's, it has a lot to do with that next gen of like Joe Short and Russ at Right Brain. It seemed like them in Michigan is when all that started ramping up a little bit.
And did their beers start making it into Marquette?
Oh yeah, that's definitely that first Brewfest year changed everything.
Yeah.
That also changed, like we talked earlier about, how the other local new breweries affected things. Well, it wasn't just them.
Yeah.
Craft breweries, beer all of a sudden was everywhere in this area after that first beer fest.
Yeah. What do you think?
Specifically New Holland, because I just kidding. But
what do you think of that? Like, what happened? What do you think made the impact?
That first Imperial Bep. I'm just kidding. Distribute. I mean, there was nobody distributing beer up here, and even almost before 2007, 8, other than Larry Bell's through, a smaller distributor up here. There wasn't a major
wine distributor, really.
But through I noticed it from 2009, that first Brew Fest. There was no other breweries but us. You know what I mean? Blackrocks opens the following year, then Ordock a couple of years later. But even in that time frame, after that first one, it seemed like every downstate brewery kind of came up to this area and started
invaded.
Yeah,
I think that's what you're going for. And what are the
which is a great.
I was just going to say, what are the pluses and minuses of that?
The plus of it all is craft beer is just totally accepted as the real beer now, and your grandpa's Budweiser isn't anymore where it was the other way around before, and I think that's awesome. I mean, there's some really great beers coming out of everywhere now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just spreading awareness. I think we're going to hit 20% soon enough, you know what I mean? But at a marketplace, but that's...
And so what is the festival? So we're in the 10th year. And what is that morphed into? So if that first year it was a bit of a flashpoint and a bit of probably an introduction of Marquette to downstate brewers and an introduction of brewing to a lot of Upers
that never tasted craft beer that much before.
What is that festival? What do you describe its role as today?
I think its role is still what it was originally, in the mission of exposing everybody into good craft beer made in Michigan. But that, to me, it's just morphed out and really opened a lot of people's eyes to how good craft beer is, and it's great that I think that its role has just, and I'm trying to think of how I want to put that into words, but
take your time.
I know, I'm just trying to have a mental block here thinking. Small break time.
Yeah, no problem.
But,
well, let me rephrase it, or kind of just help jostle. I think, what do you hope locals take away from the festival, or what do you think somebody not in the brewing community, how would they describe the importance of the festival?
Well, I think it just gives them an opportunity to try something here made in Michigan, and I think the community here locally has, embraced this festival, and it's become part of the city's, annual thing, and it's one of the major events in the city, and the city has embraced it, even though,
Do you think it's bigger than beer at this point? Part of some other larger community celebration?
I think it has, to a point. You know what I mean? It's a place that people have come together and enjoy, just the camaraderie and everything, but also to promote Michigan beer, and you know what I mean? And
so it is that promotion and awareness of beer, but it seems like it's also a celebration of just people coming together.
That's exactly, I think, what it is down there, and that's not, I don't want to say it's just about beer, because it's not. I think it's about the whole community and beer, as Michigan beer being part of that. I mean, I think a lot of people really embrace that they'd rather drink a Michigan beer made here than, the big boys beer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, I was always struck because I got to know, I was coming to the UP prior to the festival, but then via the festival, I started to meet people like Matt at the co-op.
Yeah.
So I started to meet a broader spectrum of people who cared about like quality and the co-op, I think, is a remarkable piece of this community.
Oh, I see Matt every day.
And to see them, regardless of beer or not beer, it seemed like they joined forces to celebrate another advocate for quality.
Yeah.
And I found that I found the connections here in Marquette in terms of like-minded people saying, "Hey, we should support one another." It was really kind of stunning.
Born born and raised here, so maybe I don't know any different because I didn't live in Detroit or near bigger cities where maybe people aren't quite as like they are around here. I don't know because I have nothing to compare it against.
So we were kind of talking about outside of beer, the Marquette community, and how other kind of like-minded people that are championing, good things came together, and I felt like, from my experience in the guild and in the festival, was seeing other people outside of the beer community come in and join the effort because they saw it as a good thing. And you mentioned that, hey, I'm born and raised here. It's kind of what we do. Can you tell me about that? Like, maybe what do you think this growth in the beer community, how has it reflected Marquette's values, and how do you think it's helped contribute to the community?
That's a tough. I'm not good at these questions.
But you're doing great.
But
is Marquette better for having more breweries?
Definitely look at it now. I mean, this place is so well respected, and I mean, it's a lot of these breweries. Not only when they open, they embrace the local causes and the local people, and you know what I mean. From the biking community, our doc does so much support for so many charities. I mean, they got involved, and people totally showed the love back to me, you know what I mean? And it's unbelievable. Really, I mean, Blackrocks especially, they've really made themselves a name and a place to be in this town, you know what I mean? But I think the community as a whole totally supports the craft beer, or beer and Michigan, especially the Marquette breweries, all the local breweries. Cognition, I mean, it's another great story right there. But
so if you were talking, if another young brewer, several young brewers, I'm sure over your 23 years have come in and either told you they want to brew or that they are home brewing,
they want to be my assistant. Good stuff.
And so, do you have any words of encouragement in terms of, especially not so much technical, but if a young brewer was asking you about how do I get into this community, or sort of, I guess I'm weighing in on the value of connecting to other brewers versus doing it on your own. What have you learned over the years? Because you're one of the few guys that has lived in both worlds of, like, you were brewing on your own out of necessity, and now you have a community of people you can talk with.
Yeah.
What's the value of that, and how would you recommend it to a young brewer?
I mean, the value of it all is just the amount of knowledge and I think all of us that are totally willing to share that knowledge and experience with anybody new, with the newer crowd. Definitely I would. If they come and talk to me, I'd tell them everything. I mean, I'm not going to, I'll tell them what's in my recipe. Theoretically, but as a whole, this community, for a young brewer, I'd say the number one thing though is you gotta have that passion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This isn't just something to be glamorous so I can say I'm a brewer. You gotta have the passion for it. But theoretically,
what would your words of advice be in terms of joining the community and the importance of having one and having the guild? If they said, should I join the guild, or fuck it?
The guild, to me, the guild's an obvious choice. I can't believe 100% of the breweries almost are now, but for what they offer, for what you cost to be involved, is relatively very low to me. But I think all guild members, I think almost everybody in our brewing guild community are willing to help one another. You know what I mean? It seemed like a time long ago that a lot of breweries are more defensive towards each other because they were in competition, it seemed like, or maybe society's changed a little bit too since then. But to me, I think almost every brewery in the community I ever dealt with, that I think they all are, is to support each other. You call somebody, I need this, or could you help and steer me this way, you know what I mean? But and I think the young crowd needs to see that we are here to help, you know what I mean? The more we grow, the better. There's a new brewing cooperative trying to open here in town. Have you heard about that? They're part of the homebrew guild or club that's here in Marquette. They've purchased the building already. they've sold shares. I actually bought a share, and I'm a member now. You know what I mean? They're trying to do what they call. There's not many brewing cooperatives.
Right.
So basically, I didn't know you didn't realize that was over there.
No.
I think they'll be down at the fest.
I'm old and out of touch.
I'll have to. No, it's they go show you the place. It's over. They'll be down at the fest because I think a bunch of them are on the volunteer crew for Scotty.
So
put them
they're
up.
able to come in and brew.
But it's called Marquette Home Brewers. They formed like maybe 5 years ago because they'd have judging contests. So me and Grant and some of the other brewers would be the judges, all right? And they'd enter blind beers and we would sit there and...
That's fun.
And we've been doing that for quite a few years now. So I got to know a lot of them guys, you know what I mean? Because some of them one works here, Chris Thompson, and the other one's at Jasper Ridge Brewing now.
Oh, yeah.
Matt Vierling. Those are all part of those guys. But now they formed the Marquette Brewing. And this is a thing that kind of goes on with your question you asked about the younger. I've been helping them whatever I can, you know what I mean? I think it's great. That'd be awesome. This is a group of homebrewers that says, why don't we just start a brewery, you know what I mean, or a cooperative, and we can all brew and open it, because it's going to be open like a normal pub. And
wow.
So that's actually kind of great.
It's a whole new way to look at things. What do you think, is anything you think is important to keep what we have in place for you? Like, what do you think is important to keeping things healthy and
brewing industry,
keeping you brewing for another 23 years or whatever you want to do?
I'm gonna have to retire by then. Gotta keep me healthy, but
yeah, that's true.
I think the thing with what we are is it's always been almost consistent, like over the years of what amounts. It kind of like I said, I remember Rex publishing something a few years back where my barrel numbers were exact for like, and he's like, here's a picture of consistency. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that article for some reason. It's been a long time. I haven't talked to Rex in a while, but to keep me going, it's just gonna be business as usual, I think.
Can you imagine anything that would keep people from continuing to go to the craft breweries and going back to something less expensive?
I don't see that happening. Yeah. I hope not, but I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody keeps saying there's going to be a craft bubble again, or you know what I mean? It might do this, but it's going to, at best, it's only going to...
Yeah, I'm with you.
...stale off. I don't see a drop happening.
And why do you think that is? What do you think?
Because I think people have learned that there's more in beer out there than light, lager pills.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, our grandpas, and I don't think that ever going to change. If anything, I think...
Do you think that also goes beyond the beer into the fact that they like these independent, personality-driven companies?
Small, especially so many small craft breweries, and they're, supporting each little town, because each town has one that the people support. You know what I mean? And that's what's different, too, about it. And
and you guys, and your beer ends up representing Marquette over the last 20 years. If you come to Marquette, you
go there,
you're going to go there, and you're going to have your beer, and that's part of my trip.
But, I just think people appreciate flavor in beer, and they, bringing back a lot how the old world beer used to be, you know what I mean? Before it got, watered down and pre-prohibition. I mean,
Yeah. Well, and even post-prohibition, there's
suffered even... I meant post-prohibition.
It suffered a lot of damage because it just...
There was like 1,000 breweries or 2,000 before Prohibition. I think there was only like 40 some or 50 that reopened after that. I don't know if that number's right off the top of my head. It got low
at some point, yeah. Well, I think we're good.
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking the time and making beer for everybody all these years.
I just appreciate the opportunity to do it, because if it wasn't for the consumers and all the people that enjoy it, I wouldn't be doing it, or I wouldn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm glad I had the opportunity to grow with it from the beginning, because it's there for that whole ride.
Thanks for listening and sharing while supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. The Michigan Brewers Guild was formed in 1997 with its first summer beer festival taking place in July of 1998. Its now 5 annual festivals are dedicated exclusively to Michigan beer brewed by more than 270 member breweries. The Michigan Brewers Guild exists to promote and protect the passionate Michigan beer industry in every way possible. To learn more, visit us at mibeer.com or say hello on one of our social media pages, as we love hearing from you. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer.
Let's drink Michigan beer.